This may look like just any ordinary city park, but this is really hallowed ground. So perhaps you could tell us, what is under our feet?
Well, you know, when you walk through a historic place, it's so easy not to know what is really there. And this would be one especially so because you're walking in a cemetery. There are no grave markers here, but brave soldiers who defended this city in the Revolutionary era and then died of diseases while they were in captivity, they're buried here in unmarked graves. And it reminds us of that great phrase that freedom is not free. It costs someone else a great price. And so often we're not grateful for that.
And Jesus also taught us that no greater love than this, that a man will lay down his life for his friends. And one of the things that really inspires me every time I come here, and sometimes I just come and just sit and think about it, all those men that are buried here, I don't know their names. I remember Washington and Franklin and Jefferson and all those founding fathers that we remember and talk about, but those men, who knows what their names were? But yet because of them and because of their sacrifice, that's why we have a country. And we are eternally indebted to them for the sacrifice. So way back at the beginning of our series, we talked about pledging our lives and our sacred honor and our fortunes. Yeah, they gave their lives so that we could have this kind of life that we enjoy today. And we must never forget them.
When we look at the statue of Washington that presides over this, we tend to think, what a superhero he was. Superhuman almost. But no, he was only able to do his work because of all the people that followed him. And you know, I don't know who's watching us today, but I want you to know that when you follow King Jesus, you're following a far greater leader than George Washington. Amen. And the scriptures say that our labors that are given for the Lord will not be forgotten. He's not so unjust to forgive us what we've given. And so, Stephen, a lot of people look to us as ministers, as teachers, as those who are called to lead in the church or history tours. But we know that we're nothing. It's King Jesus that counts. And we're asking others, follow us only because we follow Christ.
In fact, he even said, apart from me, you can do nothing.
That's right. And when we think of Washington, he understood one man can't fight an army standing against him. It takes the power of God's grace in other people to believe that the cause is just. So Washington is a great leader. In a small way, he reminds us that true leadership inspires others to serve sacrificially, selflessly, for a cause greater than themselves. And it's when we capture that again, we not only get a little bit of Washington, but we get the hope for the future of our country.
And when you said that a cause greater than ourselves, not only do I not know the names, or we do not know the names of the men who lie here, but they didn't know us either. And yet they were still willing to give their lives for the generations that would follow them. And here we are.
There's a great line in the very first Continental Congress minutes that say, we are here for the unborn millions that will depend on what we do today. And guess what? The unborn millions that the Lord should tarry, that are going to be impacted by those that hear this message and will redouble their efforts, will change history of lives unborn. And that's the great privilege of being a Christian, of being a leader, and I humbly suggest being an American.
Amen. So why is there a flame over there? What does this represent for us?
The flame reminds us that there is an energy that is always necessary for there to be freedom. And if that energy stops, freedom will disappear. Sometimes it's called the eternal flame of freedom. If you think about the issue, there's that ancient legend that Prometheus stole fire from the heavens. But George Washington said the sacred fire of liberty has been entrusted to the experiment that's in the hands of the American people. So when I look at that fire by Washington, I'm remembering his words in his first inaugural address, who said, this is a fire that God has given to us. It's the flame of freedom, and our job is to make sure it's never extinguished. We can't predict what the future would do, but we're to make sure it's alive in our day, and we pass it on to the next generation.
And so now it's our job to keep that flame burning bright.
Amen. Well said.
So we talked in an earlier session when we talked about the Liberty Bell and how that crack went through that word liberty. And it reminds us how fragile liberty is and something we must never take for granted. And so if these men could sacrifice as they did, what are we willing to do to keep that flame of liberty burning bright?
Well, John F. Kennedy said it so well. He was no George Washington, but he was a patriot. He said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I think we should take that to heart again and say, what value do I add so that those who come after me will find a country that's better than what we found it? Today, when you live for yourself, you're beginning to dismantle the very American story. When you give yourself for something that's true, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of others and those after you, you're helping to preserve the future of the greatest country of freedom that's ever been on planet Earth.
And as we tried to show through this whole series, when we consider ourselves a nation under God, and that's part of our motto, to be a nation under God, why is that still so important? Why is that still a message that we need to continue to proclaim?
Well, it's interesting that when we had the Pledge of Allegiance in its original form, it did not have the phrase, one nation under God. And there was a sermon that President Eisenhower heard where it was emphasized how important in our struggle with atheistic communism, as we think about the American form of democracy, that we recognize government is not God, but it has a higher transcendent authority. And so he began to support the idea of amending that classic pledge to the flag by saying, one nation under God. And so when we say it today, you'll often hear people say, I pledge allegiance to the flag and the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. But you look at it, there's no comma there. And the reason that we pause is that it originally was not there. And people are remembering we added it, but we've forgotten that we've added it.
And the reason why we added it
is because, as Eisenhower will say, our great battle against godless communism is not our military weapons, but are the transcendent power of faith. When we trust in God that's above government, we have a principle of justice. And so we are here remembering that Washington was someone who believed in the transcendent authority of God. He lived under God. Providence was his doctrine. And so it should be ours as well, and it's our hope as a nation.
And as you read the words that are on this monument that is behind us, please keep it in mind that the responsibility of keeping that flame of freedom burning bright depends upon us. And that we will continue to pray that we will not only be one nation, but will be one nation under God.